Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Also, hit that like button and drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on today's topic. Today, we are diving into our weekly pick'em for Week 15 of the NFL season. How's it going, Roman?
I'm good, Drew. It's a bit tough today for me just because, just to get into this preface, if I were to ask the audience right now, the listeners at home, to guess between me and Chris who lost their fantasy game this week, I'm sure most people would pick Chris, but unfortunately that's not the case. I lost my playoff game on a Monday night due to a player that I will not be naming today. And although I had Lamar Jackson and he did go off, it just wasn't good enough apparently. And I feel robbed. I feel cheated. But we move. And also Chris's Bears came through for him, putting him ahead in the standings by 1. How do you feel about that, Drew?
Yeah, so first touch on your loss. I mean, that's tough. I feel bad for you. It's Kareem Hunt. That was his 2 touchdown performance there Monday night. That's what, for the listeners at home, that's what cost Roman his playoff bid. In terms of the Bears, I mean, it sucks. I'm a game back, but it's only a game. I guess both the Broncos won, and I got into a little rift in the comment section, talking trash about the Broncos, and then they proved me wrong and won. And then I talked a lot of smack about the Bears last week too, and they pulled off a victory as well. So. Not a great week for me either, Roman, but nevertheless, we'll push on into the news and notes for this week.
Yeah, a little change of a turn today. I'll be doing news and notes. First of all, our Lions, our quarterback, maybe not anymore, but we'll have to see. Matthew Stafford, he played most of the game but exited late with a rib injury. He went to the locker room but came back, but didn't make it on the field. Chase Daniel had to finish the game. Could have came back. He was in a lot of pain as the reports came out, but just some cartilage injury. He didn't break any ribs, which I think is good, but I doubt we'll see him for the rest of the year. There's no reason to start him. And it looks like Chase Daniel will be the Lions starter moving forward. And hopefully that's not the last Lions game for Stafford, because I personally would like to see him back. And the contract is too big to move. But other than that, I think it's definitely going to cause more controversy whether his time in Detroit is done or not. Another quarterback, Alex Smith, left the game with a calf injury against the 49ers. Dwayne Haskins had to finish that game. We don't know exactly whether he'll play yet on Sunday, but I think having Haskins in there is going to be a significant downgrade, considering that Smith was actually performing quite well and was actually leading their team to a division bid, which we will talk about in a little bit. Another running back, Ronald Jones, he had surgery this morning on his pinky to get a pin in his finger, but he's still projected to play, which I think is good. It doesn't seem too major, but as long as he's in, I think he's worth starting for fantasy purposes, and I still think it won't change much. If it was that significant, he'd probably miss a game or two, but the fact that he's playing, I think, is very significant and a positive. Deebo Samuel, hamstring injury, left the game. We'll see if he plays. Devontae Parker, though, a little bit more significant. He left earlier in the game for Miami with another hamstring injury. It's slight, so we don't know if he's going to play or not. But Gesicki, after having 2 touchdowns, he had a great game. One pretty much in triple coverage. He hurt his shoulder. I'm not sure what the updates on that are, but definitely significant for Miami. Those 2 weapons in Parker and Gesicki, they're definitely going to need both of them against a tough New England matchup that we'll get into later. Tight end Noah Fant left the game quite early on with an illness, never returned. Definitely something to monitor throughout the week. He's back in practice, I believe, but as we've seen a couple players like Clyde, you have an illness, but you don't get as much playing time. So we'll know if it's actually serious or not, or whether he suits up, because those could be quite tricky. And then lastly, Mike Williams with the back injury. He is back at practice, though, but it's a Thursday night matchup, so you could see him out. And speaking of that Thursday night game, Jacobs, Eckler, and Allen are all questionable just due to the early game, but they're all expected to be back. But it's just something worth noting. So, Drew, any of those speak out to you?
Yeah, I mean, as a Lions fan, it's definitely the Matthew Stafford injury. Just because for what you said right there was it might have been his last game. And first of all, I'm going to go a little bit on my soapbox here and just say the refing in that game, the Lions Packers
Yeah,
game. I
yeah.
don't like to call it the refs too much, but that was brutal. Like
Preach.
not just the him getting literally folded like a folding chair by Kenny Clark on that last play that ended up costing probably the rest of the season and maybe even costing the Lions a playoff spot. Who knows? But that was ridiculous. The one time when the Packers, I think I forgot, I didn't know who the secondary person was, but he boxed out, I think, Quintez Cephas, no pass interference, two refs literally standing right there. And then, of course, the Marvin Jones Jr., which I've seen a lot of people talk about. Clearly, awesome catch, got control of the ball, 2 feet down. You could see the rubber pellets coming up on the ground, and they still ruled it not a catch. So I don't know what Matt LaFleur or Aaron Rodgers did for the refs before the game, but they were just all – and this is the same crap we saw as Lions fans last year, and it was ridiculous. But anyway, back to the injuries. Matthew Stafford, it is – that's why I have my Stafford jersey on right now. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if that was maybe his last game, and that's going to be the last moment we remember is him getting absolutely destroyed by the Packers and by Kenny Clark of all people. And I tend to be on the side of he's probably going to be back next year, only because it's going to be difficult if this injury is really serious. If the Lions are going to trade him, they're probably not going to be able to get as much back for him if they trade him now, because the last image teams are going to have is the same. He's got the thumb thing. He's got the rib thing now. He had the back thing last year. So I think for the Lions' sake, it makes a little more sense for them to keep him for at least the start of next year, have him be healthy, have him play well, and then trade him after that. Because I definitely think he's going to get traded inevitably, in my opinion. But right now with the injury, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. But I know a lot of people here in Detroit are like, he's done. He's never coming back. But I tend to be on the side of he's probably going to come back. And I think it's probably the right move as for the reasons I just stated.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Just to touch on the game that you kind of ranted about, it was quite funny that you brought up Aaron Rodgers because he actually went on the Pat McAfee show yesterday and said that Marvin Jones had one hell of a catch. So I think he knew that it was a catch. I'm sure everyone knew it was a catch except for the refs who were quite blind on that play. But
yeah,
anyway,
the fact that wasn't even the worst call of the game just shows you how bad the refs were. But anyway, this is an Lions-centric podcast. So we can move on to the next news and note if you want.
Yeah, some defensive injuries now. 2 Colts, Darius Leonard and Xavier Rhodes, a back and knee injury, both not to be considered too serious. And we might see them. We'll probably expect them both to be back this week. Just if it was anything serious, it would just take a huge toll on that Colts defense, who's been performing very well. Leonard has been a stronghold, and Rhodes is actually having a good bounce back season compared to his last couple in Minnesota. But we should see them back this week. Fred Warner had a concussion, went into concussion protocol. He passed, I believe, but still something worth monitoring because they're going to need him this week. And then 2 cornerback injuries. Marcus Peters left Monday Night Football a little bit mid-game with a calf injury. You said he spit on Jarvis Landry, right, Drew?
Yes. Yeah, there's video. You can check it out. I think it's on TMZ. You can see him spit at Jarvis Landry. But yeah.
And then lastly, Darius Slay back on the injury report, back in our news and notes. He just can't stay healthy. This time, another concussion. I don't know. It's just tough for him because it doesn't change anything that he is an injury-prone player, and it's just not with the Lions this time.
Yeah.
All right, so time to switch gears. We're going to talk about the NFC East for a little bit. Jalen Hurts got his win in his first start of his career against a tough Saints team. Actually, I think led the whole game, I believe. But it was just crazy to see how much that team flipped the switch from being really bad with Wentz in the field to actually being excited, similar to like the Lions and Bevel. They had a lot of energy. They actually scored points. Miles Sanders came out of nowhere. On Chris and I's bench, unfortunately. 2 touchdowns. One was like an 80-plus yarder. Really good to see. And even the defense stepped up too against a good Saints offense, even though they didn't have Breeze. But I don't know if Philadelphia has much of a chance, though, at the division. But I think you can definitely say that they're more competitive, and they might make a run. What do you think?
Yeah, so they're a game and a half out right now. We'll talk about it here in the next point when we go over the overall playoff picture. But it's going to be hard. I mean, a game and a half. They have a tough matchup this week, and there's only 3 games left. So a game and a half is not a small margin to overcome here. But if Jalen, I mean, you just look at all the media and you could just say like they were ready to give Jalen Hurts the MVP. It seemed like you would have thought he was the next Patrick Mahomes. But that's just how I guess how much overreacting the Philadelphia media and ESPN and all those people they do it to get clicks, right? Because Hurts, I mean, he played well, I thought, but it's just there's not a lot of time left, and I think the real story will be in the offseason about whether they decide that he is the guy. I mean, they did spend a second round pick on him, and if they did end up deciding he is the guy, and they look to move Wentz elsewhere, I mean that'll be I'm sure it's going to be a storyline we'll talk about in our offseason episodes. It's going to be a storyline everyone talks about in the offseason. It might be the top storyline of the offseason, see if Wentz gets traded. But what was really interesting for me with Hurts was how a lot of people said, I think including Doug Peterson, said how Hurts' leadership was what really stood out and was what really helped the team out. It wasn't just his play on the field. And I can't believe we didn't mention this last week. In the previous weeks, we've mentioned Wentz's problems, but that's been a big criticism of him, not only this season, but also in previous seasons. And that was part of the reason why people liked Nick Foles a little bit more than him, was because of his leadership skills. And Wentz, I think, had a little sense of entitlement. And that's very fascinating to see. And I kind of forgot about those problems until they were brought up when Hurts was playing so well. And I guess by all accounts is a great leader. So we talked about last week, maybe the Lions or another team in need of quarterback making a trade and buying low on Wentz. But I am definitely concerned about those leadership issues with him, because everyone kept saying, oh, well, he doesn't have anyone around him. He doesn't have anyone around him. But then Hurts just unlocked everybody, it seemed like. So and a lot of that comes down to character and leadership, that both things that maybe Wentz lacks.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you talk about the entitlement, that's just important to mention, because you could say he had overconfidence, but now his confidence is at an all-time low. Consistently letting Hurts in the offense, sitting on the sidelines more and more, definitely a big toll. And I think it's maybe a reality check for him to maybe become that better leader that you were suggesting.
Yeah.
We saw it this weekend with Trubisky. I've seen that comparison a couple of times, that Trubisky, once he got benched, he took it like a man. He learned from it, and then he actually came back last week and had a really good game. So I think if Wentz can do the same thing and maybe learn from this experience, whoever he plays for in 2021, maybe he'll have a better year.
Yeah, and you could say the same thing for Baker Mayfield too. He didn't get benched, but he had a big reality check last year when he wasn't playing well, and we've seen obviously the fruits of that this year, as he's having a really strong season.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I do think Wentz is a very talented quarterback, maybe even more talented than Hurts. But I think this marriage between Philadelphia is no longer working. And as I'm about to say, Doug Peterson is going to start Hurts again this week. So I think every week that we see Hurts playing is just more and more convincing that Wentz won't be in Philadelphia for much longer.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like I said last week, I'd be surprised if Wentz is in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform next year, because it's hard for a guy and it's hard for a locker room when your franchise cornerstone, the guy you spent a second overall pick on just a few years ago, is now your backup, and that's just bad for the locker room. And I think for both Wentz's career and also the long-term outlook for the Eagles and Jalen Hurts for that matter, it just makes more sense for them to get Wentz out of town.
Yeah, and just to hammer this Philadelphia point on before we move on quickly, Doug Peterson, you see him in the media, though, he isn't quite committed to choosing Hurts, like, oh, we got to watch the tape and see what he did right and see what he did wrong. But I think the longer he rides Hurts out, the more eyes, I guess you could say, on his job security, because I think if they're winning, his job secure, as if when they weren't, when Wentz was losing. So I think Pearson is going to make decisions based on his job security, and I think Hurts is just the better overall decision at this very point.
Yeah, but and it also winning helps his job security, and they're right. But as we said, it doesn't look great in terms of their playoff chances, but it's definitely very possible. Only a game and a half. If they got a tough schedule here, but hopefully if they can pull off another upset like they did last week, none of us expected them to beat the Saints. They can probably find their way in the playoffs, and I think if they find their way in the playoffs, I don't think there's no way Peterson leaves, and there's no way Hurts is not the starter next year. I think the only way Hurts is not the starter is if he just has an absolute brutal final 3 weeks. That's the only way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So the last NFC news, Washington, they beat the 49ers on the road. And with the Giants' loss, they are now in first of the division, projected to host a playoff game, which would be very, very surprising. But that could take a turn depending on how bad Smith's injury is and whether they have Haskins at quarterback, because we see Daniel Jones kind of ease back in for the Giants, and I don't think he was at 100%. But I would assume that having Jones on the field is probably better than having whatever Haskins can do at this very point. I could be wrong. You might disagree, but I think the Giants are still primed for a division overtake in the next couple of weeks, considering that no one in the NFC East has a favorable schedule in these last couple of games. I think you could very well see every team lose their game unless it's a division game, because someone has to win there. But currently Washington's in first, but I see the Giants overtaking if Washington loses a couple more games, if they have Haskins starting.
Yeah, it just depends on Daniel Jones for me if the Giants are gonna sneak into the playoffs, because and for the Washington football team, it depends on the health of Alex Smith. But I think if I had to choose between Dwayne Haskins or Colt McCoy, I would definitely choose Dwayne Haskins. And Washington, they have a really good defense. In New York, their defense is no slouch either. But I'm looking at their matchups this week. I could see a roadmap where either of them pull off a victory. It's definitely more likely that they lose against the Seahawks and Browns, respectively. However, I mean, I don't think many people expected them to win some of the games they've won so far this year. So it's not like the Seahawks and Browns are these just giants of the game that are incapable of losing games. We saw the Seahawks lose. We saw the Seahawks lose to the Giants just a few weeks ago. They could easily lose to Washington. But I think Dallas is out of it completely. But even Philadelphia, they have a shot, right? Even like Arizona, I think Arizona's going to win. Spoiler alert. But Arizona is not this juggernaut that can't lose. Basically, the Eagles have a legitimate shot at winning that game as well. So it's still up for grabs. I think it's kind of funny that at this point, the Dallas is the only team that's definitely not going to make it. And in our preseason predictions, I think Dallas was the only team that we thought they were the clear-cut favorite, right? And now they're the clear-cut bottom feeder. And really, if you look at the predictions, Washington and New York, they're below 500 teams, very similar to what people projected of them. It's just that the Eagles and the Cowboys were so far below expectations that the records we thought Washington and the Giants were going to get, they got, and we just didn't anticipate them leading to as you said, hosting a playoff game. And I mean, for Washington, sorry, I want to get this off of my chest real quick. It is just amazing that just their turnaround, right? I mean, just 3 months ago, they were the laughing stock of the league. And now they're, like, as you said, in place to host a playoff game. They got two of the best stories in the league this year in Ron Rivera and Alex Smith. They have a great defense. They still don't have a nickname, but and obviously there's some behind the scenes stuff that's still going on there that's not great. But the fact that Alex Smith, Ron Rivera, that whole team in general has been able to really turn it around and spin it into a positive is really a credit to them, regardless of if they make the playoffs or not. The fact that they're even in this position is amazing.
Yeah, I agree. They control their own destiny pretty much, and we'll see it in Week 17, Washington at the Eagles. So that's definitely a game that I'll be looking forward to. Now that they have Hurts, I think it'll be much more competitive. And you have to remember, if Washington and the Giants have the same record going into the postseason, the Giants do have that tiebreaker because they beat them twice. So
yeah,
that's definitely something to note as we move forward. Week 17 will probably be huge implications for that division. But to talk about these division races as a whole, or the playoff picture as a whole, what do you got, Drew?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go over the two playoff pictures in each conference real quick, and then we'll discuss a little bit. So in the AFC, the Chiefs currently have the 1 seed and the Steelers have the 2 seeds. Both of those teams have clinched a playoff spot. The Bills currently sit at 10-3 in the 3rd seed, and then the final division winner, the Titans, sit in 4th place at 9-4. And then the wild card spots currently are held by the Browns in the 5 spot at 9-4, the Colts in the 6th spot also at 9-4, and the Dolphins in the 7th spot at 8-5. And then currently on the bubble, we got the Ravens at 8-5, the Raiders at 7-6, the Patriots at 6-7, and mathematically still the Broncos at 5-8. And then in terms of the NFC, we got the Packers at the 1 seed, the Saints at the 2 seed. Each have already clinched a playoff spot. In the hunt, we got the Rams in the 3rd seed, leading the NFC West at 9-4, and then the 4th spot we got Washington at 6-7, as we already talked about, leading the NFC East. And then in terms of the wild card, we got the Seahawks at 5 at 9-4, the Buccaneers at 6 at 8-5, and then the Cardinals re-entering the playoff picture at 7-6 to have that final wild card spot. And then on the bubble, the Vikings and Bears are each at 6-7. The Lions, Niners, and Giants are all at 5-8. The Eagles at 4-8-1. The Cowboys 4-9, and then also the Panthers, who I guess are still mathematically have a shot at making the playoffs, also at 4-9. So of all these teams, obviously there's already 4 teams that have a locked in playoff spot. Do you think these are the other 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Do you think these are the same seeds that we will see come January, or do you think any of these teams will fall off? And then if you think someone's going to fall off, what team do you think is going to overthrow them?
Yeah, I'll start in the AFC. I think most of those teams are already set. The seedings could change a little bit, but I'm really looking towards that Miami-Baltimore race for the 7th seed. I think Baltimore has the opportunity to jump Miami, and although Miami did look good against the Chiefs for most of that game, they have some injuries to deal with, and I don't think Tua is necessarily quite there yet. And Lamar had an outstanding game. The Ravens, I think, are quite rejuvenated after that Browns win. And I'm looking towards a potential overtake for the 7th seed. But other than that, I think the AFC is all set. NFC, I think the only thing to look at there is the 7th seed also between Arizona and Minnesota, because correct me if I'm wrong, Minnesota has that tiebreaker. So if they were to have the same record, Minnesota would squeak in. But those are, I think, are the 7 teams that you mentioned. Are going to make the playoffs. The only other thing you could really look at is the NFC East, whoever just makes that division. That's pretty much it. I don't see any massive or substantial overtaking or surprise Cinderella stories from anyone in the hunt. But I think with the teams that are already locked in the playoffs and the teams that are, I think, projected to, we're going to be in for a quite interesting playoffs.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I think in the AFC, I think the Ravens are gonna pass the Dolphins. Another thing that might be interesting to watch a little bit is the AFC South, whether the Colts or the Titans, if they win the division and get that 4 seed. Because it's looking more and more likely the Bills will have the 3 seed, and then whoever comes out of the AFC South will have that 4 seed. So that'll be interesting to see. As well as Arizona, Minnesota. I give the edge to Arizona. I know I'm the resident hater on the Cardinals on this podcast, but I think the Cardinals are a little bit better than the Vikings. But that's still it's only 1 game apart, and as you mentioned, the Vikings do have that tiebreaker in hand as well. So those are the big races, and then obviously we already talked about at length the NFC East. That'll be interesting to see. But if you had to pick right now, Roman, who do you think is going to win the NFC East? Real quick before we hop into the next news and note.
Oh, it's tough. I'm probably gonna have to give a slight edge to Washington. What about you?
I mean, I'm biased because I like Alex Smith. I liked him back when he was in Kansas City and San Francisco, so I'll probably go with Washington too. I just don't want to see Philadelphia because I feel like we've already kind of run that thing. We've already run that. That's already run its course, basically. I'd be much more intrigued to see either a Daniel Jones-led team or a Alex Smith-led team on one leg make the playoffs instead of Philadelphia.
Yeah, it'll be even funny if we see them with their backups in the playoff, whether it's Haskins or Colt McCoy being the quarterback for that team who hosts the game. But if Alex Smith is starting, I'm feeling much more comfortable about them, especially like you said with the defense.
Yeah, if that happens, I won't be as interested. I might want to see Jalen Hurts instead, but we'll have to see. There's still 3 weeks left, but as you mentioned, it's going to be really entertaining to see. So our second to last news and note point, non-QB MVP candidates. We've mentioned some. We got kind of called out here a little bit that all of our MVP candidates a few weeks ago were all quarterbacks. So we wanted to touch on some non-quarterback MVP candidates. I know there's a lot of great receivers out there. Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, Allen Robinson are the first to come to mind. And running backs, you got Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, obviously, Derrick Henry, who's just an absolute beast. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you got TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, lots of great candidates that don't throw the football, at least usually. So, Roman, who do you like out of those candidates? Or do you have somebody else that maybe I didn't mention?
No, I think you pretty much hit it home. I think Derrick Henry is the major front runner, I guess, if it's non-quarterbacks at least. I think what he's done recently has just been astronomical. Still leading the league in rushing yards. He'll probably hold that title again this season. consistently doing week in, week out, even against bad defenses or good defenses too. Consistent, and I think he's going to be the reason that Tennessee edges that division out against the Colts.
Yeah, I like Derrick Henry too. He's probably my pick. If you would ask me mid-season, I think I mentioned him, Alvin Kamara, but then he had a nice week last week, but he cooled off a little bit after Drew Brees went down. I gotta look. You gotta look at the receivers though. Devontae Adams is just, maybe because I'm biased and I watched the Lions game.
Very true. Very true.
He was just an absolute beast. He did miss some time with some injury though. And then Aaron Donald, even Myles Garrett too. I think Myles Garrett would have a legitimate MVP shot as well if he hadn't gone down with COVID there and lost some games to that. But I think those are the top guys. Unfortunately, as it was politely put in our comments a few weeks ago, it's a very quarterback-centric award. So unfortunately, it's kind of pointless for us to even mention these guys. But under all things being equal, under fair circumstances, I think those guys should be under major MVP consideration for sure. But it's probably going to go to a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, maybe Josh Allen's making a late push here. Who knows? Kyler Murray's fallen off a little bit. But I think those, let's talk about quarterback candidates real quick. I think those are the three top guys. Do you have anyone else that you want to add in terms
of?
I
think it's those three. And
yeah, because even Russell Wilson's keeps turning the ball over. Seahawks falling off a little bit. I remember in our midseason, we're like, no way Russell Wilson is getting an MVP vote this year. He might not get an MVP vote this year because that's how much he's fallen off since his strong start to this season. But for our final news and note, do you want to take it away here?
Yes. First of all, Raiders fired the defensive coordinator, Paul Gunter, after giving up 44 points to the Colts. Not a great look, but hey, maybe that opens the door for a Matt Patricia, John Gruden reunion. We'll see. We'll see about that. Not much to say about that. But the Lions actually made some interesting moves this morning as we're recording, and yesterday. I'll start with yesterday's news first. They brought on Chris Spielman, former linebacker and Fox anchor, to be on a full-time position for the team, assisting Rod Wood and Sheila Ford-Hamp in their decisions, especially at a time where they're looking for a GM and a coach. And they also bring on Barry Sanders for that search as well. So I think both those guys in the building having a hand in that pick, I think I can put my trust in that. Also, they just came out this morning that they're going to interview Louis Riddick on Friday for a GM position. I'm very much in favor of that. He's my top guy, currently a broadcaster from Monday Night Football, but he's been in the league before. He knows his stuff. And I think for me, having him would be tremendous. I would be very speechless if we got him because he's also interviewing for other vacancies as well. But I think he's spoken highly about Stafford. He's spoken highly about Robert Saleh, a person that we've projected him to be our head coach as well. So I think getting him at least an interview and at least having it happen is good news. What do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. It's promising for sure that they're not just doing what we've done in previous years, where it's like, I guess we'll hire this guy. Let's see what happens. Maybe I'm still have my doubts for sure, but it seems like Sheila Ford is doing her due diligence, is maybe more involved and different than the previous Ford owners. And it's really promising to see that they're not only bringing in former Lions, maybe they'll bring in Calvin Johnson. I know he hates the Lions now, but who knows? Maybe they'll alleviate the relationship problems they have and bring him back on a role at some sort. And also just interviewing Louis Riddick, he's my top candidate as well. I like him. I like John Dorsey too. But Riddick is definitely my favorite pick as I've done more research here in recent weeks. And I think bringing in Riddick will definitely open us to better coaching opportunities as well. You mentioned Robert Saleh, maybe a guy like Bieniemy, other guys as well. So overall, just a great move, great hires by the Lions, and it gives me a little optimism. I mean, as a Lions fan, you got to take what you can get, and that was definitely some positive news last week and early this morning.
Yep.
So now we're going to jump in. We're going to switch it up a little bit here. We're going to go and do our fantasy picks of the week. So I'll start with my first one. It's Roman. You're not going to like this one. I'm going to be honest, but it's Kareem Hunt. It's Kareem Hunt. The obvious pick here is Nick Chubb. I wanted to go a little bit. I tend to be chalk with these, and depending on how you feel, Kareem Hunt might be a chalk pick as well. But I wanted to go a little bit off the board, and either Hunt or Chubb are great picks this week against the Giants, who are a good defense. They gave up the 25th most points, or 25th least amount of They're the 25th worst team. I can talk. They're the 25th worst team. Or wait, no. The 25th. They rank 25th. There we go. In fantasy scoring against running backs. That's what I was trying to say. It's hard to talk. You got numbers, math is hard. But fact of the matter is, Giants aren't great at limiting fantasy running backs, and I think Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are both going to be really good options. Roman, please take it away here. What are your thoughts on Kareem Hunt before I say anything else stupid?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have to give credit where it's due. He came out of nowhere last week and had a great performance. Maybe that was just because of Chubb's couple early touchdowns. They wanted to give Hunt some love towards the end of the game, but definitely a great option against the Giants too. Yes, they have a good defense, but I think Cleveland will probably overpower them in every possible way in this game. It was actually quite ironic because I'll just go into my pick. I was going to pick Baker Mayfield as my first fantasy pick because he had a great game against the Ravens. Passing the ball, he had a rushing touchdown as well. And I think that's going to carry on into this game where I project that the Giants defense is going to be on the field for quite a lot of that game if the Giants offense can't move the ball with whoever quarterback they put on the field. So I think that Baker Mayfield will have a plethora of opportunities to get in the end zone, run for a touchdown. And I think he's going to take the next step in terms of taking the Browns from a good team to a playoff contender, a Super Bowl contender in these next couple of weeks. So they definitely need him to step up as he has already.
Yeah, for speaking on the Browns specifically, I mean, last week was definitely even though they lost, they really showed that they can be a legitimate team and maybe a dark horse title contender. Who knows? And Baker and Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, all great fantasy options and also all great real options in helping the Browns achieve that goal and hopefully helping you win your fantasy playoff matchups. But I mean, if you're starting Baker Mayfield, it's probably more of your streaming quarterback, so you might still be in the playoffs or you might be battling for that 4th or 5th place game. Who knows? But who's your second pick, Roman?
Yeah, I normally don't pick running backs out of a committee, but I think it's starting to become a little bit clearer in San Francisco. I have Mostert on my team, but he's dealing with his own limitations at the moment. I'm going to go with Jeff Wilson. Got in the end zone last week, I think even the week before. And the past couple of weeks, it was clearly a two-man show between Mostert and Wilson. But now I think Wilson has completely taken over that job, I believe. And against the Dallas defense, that's very porous, as we've seen the past couple of weeks. It should be a great opportunity for Wilson to break the pylons, get in the end zone, and probably to do more work on the receiving end as well.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I agree. He's a solid option this week. Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I agree with the pick. It's a solid pick. So I'll jump into my pick. It's J.K. Dobbins. He's a guy who I remember, Roman, you were really high on entering the season. Chris and I were a little more skeptical, but I remember your reasoning being that by the end of the season, he's going to be the guy. He's going to be a really good option. And then I already said this previously, but then by week 1, everyone lost their minds and was like, "Oh my God, Dobbins sucks," even though we all expected this. And it's really gone by the book. By the second half of the season, he's really been emerged as a lead back. He's had a few solid fantasy weeks, minus the one game he missed there because of COVID reasons. But now he gets another really good matchup here against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are the third or fourth worst team against running backs in terms of fantasy points. So he had a nice week last week. I think he's due for another big week this week as well.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. J.K. Dobbins. He didn't necessarily have the best game last week, but I do expect him to get in the end zone against a very bad Jaguars team where there can be points all around. And if you want someone out of that backfield, J.K. Dobbins is definitely on the rise. Also, I would maybe consider a league winner besides Cam Akers, who I'd classify that as well.
Yeah, and that's something we didn't touch on the news and notes, but Minshew Mania is back, so it might be a competitive game, and Dobbins might need to perform well for Baltimore to emerge victorious. But Jacksonville's been competitive. They're a very competitive 1-win team because they have had opportunities to beat some playoff teams, some pretty solid teams. They just fall short every time, which honestly, if you're a Jaguars fan, that's probably what you want, right? You want to be competitive, you want to be watchable, but also you want to suck enough so you get a high pick, maybe a Justin Fields, maybe a Trevor Lawrence, if the Jets can pull off a victory here very soon. But anyway, that's enough Jaguars talk for now. Let's hop into the pick'em for this week. So unfortunately, Chris has been having some technical difficulties, so he will not be joining us, but we'll probably pin his picks in the comment section to keep with the records and have you all see who he's picking. But because we don't want to leave this blank, and he's not here to say anything. Chris is a bona fide Lions hater. You can ask me, ask Roman, ask his other friends. He's a Lions hater. So for this week, we're just going to have him pick the Lions for literally every game, and we're going to see what he says about that, just for the color's sake. And there we go. So he's a Lions fan this week, regardless of what he says. But in terms of our picks, we'll give you our picks right now. We got the Chargers and the Raiders, a really interesting Thursday night matchup. Roman, who you like in this one?
I think this is going to be a great game. Last time these teams met, came down to the very end. I think I was the only one who chose no. Chris chose the Raiders, and me and you chose the Chargers to win that game. And as though I'm not feeling as confident with Vegas recently, they've kind of letting me down. I think I'm going to go with them this week because they're the better team, and if they have Jacobs and Waller, they should have every reason to win that game.
Yeah, and we didn't really mention them, which is unfortunate because they had a playoff spot. They were right in the thick of the playoff race just a few weeks ago, but they've almost lost to the Jets. They have had a tough few weeks here as of late, and it's going to be a long shot for them, especially now that the Ravens are coming on. It's going to be a long shot for the Raiders to sneak into the playoffs, but they absolutely need this win if they want to still keep their slim playoff hopes alive. The Chargers, I mean, to their credit, they played well last week. I still don't see a way Anthony Lynn keeps his job at the end of the year, but if they win this game in primetime on Thursday night, it may do some wonders and maybe get people maybe willing to give him another year, but who knows? I'm just excited to watch Justin Herbert. It seems like the Chargers really haven't been in primetime all that much this year, so it'll be nice to watch Justin Herbert play some football because he's been a really good rookie, and I think probably the hands down rookie of the year favorite, especially that with Joe Burrow falling down to injury. Yes.
One other thing to mention, I'm sorry to cut you off. Josh Jacobs trolled the whole fantasy community 5 minutes before his game started saying, "Oh, I'm not playing. And then we'd have to figure out that he was actually playing, and he put up a dud week. So as a Jacobs owner, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for the whole of Jacobs owners, it was a roller coaster of emotions that probably ended with a very sour taste in our mouths. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, that's just not nice in my opinion. Like, why you got to be a jerk, Jacobs? You say, like, just don't play then. Why'd you play and then have people start you and then just put up a dead of a week? But anyway, Jacobs doesn't watch this podcast most likely, so he probably doesn't care what we think. But we'll jump in now to the Buffalo Bills and the Denver Broncos. A statement win for the Bills last week in prime time against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was a little. I'll admit, you and Chris were like the Bills might be title Super Bowl favorites a few weeks ago, and I was like, really? Are they really? Even though I'm a big Josh Allen fan, but they've keep proving me wrong game after game, week after week here. And this week it should be a very winnable game. I'm not a Broncos hater, contrary to popular belief, but I think the Broncos they're severely overmatched in this one. I think the Bills are the easy favorite. But Roman, what do you think?
Yeah, to give credit to the Broncos, they won when we all picked against Carolina. So I think you have something in Drew Lock, and I think against many beliefs in that area, I think Drew Lock is the answer there, and I think he'll be the franchise quarterback for the years to come. However, I will be choosing Buffalo because I think they're the most equipped team to take down the Chiefs in the playoffs, and Josh Allen has been playing out of his mind, and I think I'm going to go with them.
Yeah, pretty chalk game. You probably already know who I'm going to pick by the intro I gave, but yeah, it's definitely the Bills. I mean, I'm not sure how the math works out if they can clinch a playoff spot with a win, but they got to be pretty close. I know they eliminated the Patriots aren't winning the division this year for the first time in forever. They were eliminated from that contention last week. So if the Bills lose this game, I'll definitely have some concerns. But the Broncos aren't an awful team. As you said, they won last week when we all doubted them. But I think the Bills, this is a very winnable game. I predict probably 10 to 14-point win at least for the Bills in Week 15. Next up, another game. Should have an easy pick here. The Panthers and the Packers. The Panthers, already mentioned they lost last week when we all picked them to win, and the Packers, we all picked them to win, and they did win. Again, I'm not going to go back on my soapbox and talk about how brutal the calls were that maybe gifted the Packers that win, but regardless, they're a great team. They're now the 1 seed in the NFC. They get an easy matchup this week, and I'll go first for this one, and I'm going to pick the Packers to overthrow, I guess. That's probably not the right word, against the Panthers. But, Roman, who do you like?
Yeah, it's going to suck without McCaffrey. I know last week me and Chris thought Carolina would be being McCaffrey back, but he ended up not playing, and he looks like he's going to be out again today. They might as well just shut him down for the rest of the season. There's no point. I'm going to go with Green Bay because if they win out, they're going to get the first place bye. over the Saints. So I think that's definitely important to note, and it starts here for them.
Yeah, and we saw last year where the Packers kind of flamed out in the playoffs in the NFC Championship game against the Niners, and I think that first round bye would do wonders for them. It's hard to believe. I think Aaron Rodgers has only been to one Super Bowl, and he won it, but it was almost a decade ago now. It's really, really surprising. So I don't like the Packers. I'm not an Aaron Rodgers fan, but he's a legend. I respect him. You can't deny that, and it'd be cool to see him at least reach another Super Bowl for sure.
Right.
Next up, we got the Lions and the Titans. As a Lions fan, I unfortunately have to say that this is probably another easy game to pick with a clear favorite. It's unfortunate that Stafford's going to be out. I don't see they shouldn't play him. There's no point in playing him. Their playoff chances are basically out the window. And it's most likely going to be an easy win here for the Titans with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry. Roman, do you share that sentiment with me?
Yeah, I do. I do think they're still going to be competitive as we've seen the past couple of weeks. I don't think it'll be a blowout by any stretch of the imagination, unless Derrick Henry runs for like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think it'll be an all right game. I know Tennessee will probably win, but having the offensive pieces that we have, I do think Swift is going to have a much more better game because he wasn't very involved last week. He only ran the ball like a few times over Peterson. So I think if they get Swift the increase in carries that he deserves, it could be interesting. But ultimately, it's going to be the Titans' game to lose at home too.
Yeah, I mean the Titans don't have a great defense, but I'll be honest. I think this is blowout city, baby. I think Swift gives them an option. There's some rumblings. Maybe Galladay makes an appearance. Most likely not, though. I think with a backup quarterback, with a defense that probably could not stop a offensive core of you, me, and Chris from scoring easy touchdowns. I think the Titans have an easy win. And you're already putting the Rams down, beating the Jets. And I 100% agree with you. Not too much to add there. The Rams had another statement win last week in prime time against the Patriots, which is still a solid team, and the Jets continue to lose, unsurprisingly. But anything to add there, or the Rams just?
Yeah, I had to put that pick in for Chris too because there's just no way the Jets are winning this game.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe he would shock us. He did say he was going to put maybe a surprising pick. Maybe that was the Jets winning, but I highly doubt it. But don't worry, Jets fans. You're getting Trevor Lawrence. No worries there. Next up, I really just hate the Falcons. You know what I'm saying? When I pick them to win, they win. When I pick them to lose, they lose. They're just a very frustrating team for me. But they get an interesting matchup here against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, they're still hard to read, right? Are they a clear-cut Super Bowl contender? Are they just a pretender? Are they just going to maybe a first-round exit or a second-round exit? They're still hard to get a gauge on them. Unfortunately, they don't play a ton of great teams here from now until the playoffs. We'll have to wait and see. The Falcons, at least they're a respectable team, not a great team, not a good team, but they're still at least league average. For me, though, it was an easy pick, and that's the Buccaneers. Roman, did you agree?
Yeah, the Buccaneers have it pretty easy. They play Atlanta this week, Detroit next week, and then Atlanta again. So they can have the opportunity to win out and get a good seeding in the playoffs. And I think their game last week was very telling in how they want to play the game, run the ball, take shots when needed. Brady didn't take a whole lot of shots, but when he did, he hit on most of them. He still overthrew a couple of people though, which I will add because that was very frustrating to see. But I think he cleans it up and get a win against a very, very poor team.
Yeah. We'll jump into the next game here. Texans Colts. On paper, it's probably an easy. Oh, the Colts are going to win this game easily. But just a couple weeks ago, the Texans put up a heck of a fight and probably should have won that game had it not been for a fumble. I think it was like first or second and goal with under 2 minutes to go, and they were about to score. That I believe would have put them up and would have helped them win the game. But a costly fumble there. I guess I think it was on the 5 or 6 yard line, ultimately cost them that game. So I think this is going to be maybe a dark horse candidate for game of the week. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. We mentioned it there. We talked about the playoff picture. The Colts really need this win if they want to have a shot at winning the AFC South over the Titans. And the Texans, they just want to be respectable. I think they're probably eliminated from playoff contention. If not, they're basically eliminated from playoff contention, so they're just playing for pride here. But Roman, who do you like, the Texans or the Colts?
The Texans let us down last week. They put an absolute stinker on the field, and I think Watson got hurt for a little bit. He hurt his groin, but he finished that game out. And I think the biggest surprise with the Colts, at least, is that T.Y. Hilton has actually been very solid for him, being a real wide receiver one, because I was very much off on him going into the season. I didn't think he had anything left in the tank. but he's proving me wrong. He's actually gotten to the end zone a couple times in both the past couple of weeks. I think that happens again. I think they're going to win this game. I do think it'll be very competitive, though. I don't see us splitting on this unless you want to take the Texans route this time.
Yeah, we're gonna swap places here. I'm the big Texans guy now. No, I mean I would have probably gave it a little more thought. I wasn't high on the Texans. I didn't think they were gonna make a run to the playoffs, but I was promised by their performance against the Colts, as well as their just absolute domination by the Lions. But then last week that really turned me off to them because it's the Bears. I mean, I guess they're a decent football team, but just to get absolutely destroyed by Mitchell Trubisky, I mean, that's just outright embarrassing. So I think it's an easy pick for the Colts here. But like you said, I think it's going to be a really close game. I also think this is a really intriguing matchup, another maybe dark horse contender for game of the week in the Patriots and the Dolphins. The Dolphins, as we mentioned, we were talking about the playoff picture. They are right there in the 7th spot. If they legitimately want to make the playoffs this year, this is an absolute must win. As you mentioned, Roman, their schedule does get a little bit tougher after this game. And for the Patriots, if they want to make a unbelievable, miraculous run to the playoffs, they really need this win against the Dolphins to keep those hopes alive. So a lot on the table here for this one. But Roman, who do you like here, the Patriots or the Dolphins?
I think regardless of the Parker and Gesicki injuries, I think my view on this game would have stayed the same. Miami, pretty decent. I think they're going to make a run at the playoff spot, as we talked about already. New England absolutely sucked last Thursday night against the Rams, but they did go against a great defense. I do think Cam's going to clean it up, and Belichick doesn't lose many of these games to the Dolphins. I'm going to take the Patriots on this one, and it could be an unpopular pick, but I think this is a bounce back game for New England. And I kind of said it earlier, like Tua hasn't necessarily showed that much. I think Herbert and Burrow have both played better than him so far.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I know the Dolphins have a long-term outlook, which is good. But when you're talking about trying to make the playoffs and win this year, I honestly think Fitzpatrick gives them a better shot at winning this year than Tua. Yeah. I know you see the Dolphins winning a bunch of games, and everyone's like, oh my God, Tua's playing amazing. He really hasn't. He's been okay. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been good, as you said. He hasn't been good as Herbert, hasn't been good as Burrow. With that being said, though, the Dolphins, they need this game. Maybe I'm just buying they're gonna live up to the hype. They're gonna go out there and try their hardest, regardless of who's on the field, who's hurt, who's not. And I think they're gonna find a way to win the game. However, it is interesting to note though that last year, when it was the Dolphins and the Patriots, the Dolphins played spoiler, beat the Patriots, resulted in them not getting a first round bye, and then they lost in the first round and ultimately ended the Tom Brady era in New England on a very sour note. So the Patriots have reversed the roles here. The Patriots are able to play spoiler here for the Dolphins. So this will be an interesting game. It seems like every Patriots-Dolphins game is always entertaining and fun to watch. But from an AFC East rivalry to an NFC North rivalry in the Bears and the Vikings, the Bears made Chris look like a genius last week and made Rome and I look like dunces. We trashed the Bears pick with the Bears, and Trubisky looked really, really good. And the Vikings came up short last week and ultimately fell out of a playoff spot as well. Similar to the Dolphins, this is a must-win game for the Vikings and really the Bears. The Bears are also still right there in contention for a playoff spot with that win last week. So a lot of playoff implications in this one, especially if maybe Arizona gets upset by Philadelphia. Ultimately, I think Kirk Cousins is playing really well. I think last week was just a down week, and I think last week was also just an anomaly for the Bears. I don't think they're as good as they look like against Houston, and I think the Vikings are ultimately going to win this one. But, Roman, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't see Chicago putting up 30-plus points against Minnesota, and I think your relationship for the Falcons is the same thing I'm kind of experiencing with the Bears. Every time you don't pick them, they win. Every time you pick them, they lose.
Yeah. Frustrating.
I'm gonna be very frustrated in this game if I pick Minnesota and Chicago wins. But I do think Minnesota will win. They barely got Jefferson and Thielen involved last week. I think Kirk Cousins has to get back to his roots, run the ball, but also take his shots to those two wide receivers they have, and they're gonna win this game.
Yeah, and like I said, this will be an entertaining game to watch. Usually I don't like to watch Bears-Vikings. It's not a hugely entertaining matchup. Not a lot of big names there, I guess, aside from Dalvin Cook and Allen Robinson. I mean, Khalil Mack. I guess maybe it is a big-name game, but it's still going to be really fun to watch. Both these teams are more likely to miss the playoffs than make it. But whoever comes out of this game is going to be the one that has a clear shot at overthrowing the Cardinals for that 7th spot. So a lot on the line here. Should be a fun game to watch. Next up, a game I know everyone was really high on the Niners. Like, oh my God, they're going to make a run. They're going to sneak into the playoffs with absolutely nobody on their team. And I don't like to pat myself on the back too often, but I was right in that one. They are not going to make a run. They lost to Washington last week. So they're most likely not going to make the playoffs, unfortunately, 1 year after making the Super Bowl. I think you get the Cowboys, who are just not a great football team. But hopefully next year with Dak Prescott coming back, they're going to get a high draft pick. Second year, CeeDee Lamb will be really good next year. But both these teams are really looking towards 2021 already. So Roman, who do you think's going to win this game in just a battle of two teams with not a lot on the line here?
I do think it'll be a close game. I don't know how competitive it'll be, but it should be close considering Dallas sucks and San Francisco has a bunch of injuries. But I think when you look, I was talking about last week for a second. San Francisco, bad loss to the Washington team, but it wasn't necessarily on Salah. So I think when we look at San Francisco losing, it's not necessarily because of Salah, because they had an interception, a pick six, and a fumble recovery touchdown by Chase Young. So in that sense, I think the San Francisco defense is doing everything they have to do to win. The offense isn't just putting their share of the work.
But that's also because of the injuries, because they have nobody on their team.
But the remedy to that is playing the Cowboys. I picked San Francisco the past couple of weeks and gotten burned. I'm gonna do it again, but I really don't feel confident about this one.
Yeah, this was I thought the Bears, the last two games we did were tough to pick, the Patriots, Dolphins, and Bears, Vikings. And Niners, Cowboys was also very difficult to pick. I think these are very two evenly matched teams. I've been the Niners hater, admittedly. I was off the bandwagon as soon as guys started to get hurt there in week 1. But I will pick them this week to beat Dallas. I just have no faith in Dallas at all. Zeke hasn't looked great. Andy Dalton, okay, cool. I think the Niners will get enough, especially if Mostert is back and ready to go. I think he could have a monster game. But the Deebo Samuel injury definitely sucks. And there are some rumblings, though, that George Kittle might make an appearance in this game. So that will be interesting to see. But next up, we had a game we talked about a little bit briefly when we talked about the Washington football team, but they're taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Washington currently in charge of the NFC East. But if Alex Smith isn't playing, it's going to be tough for them to win this game. And the Seahawks, again, they're not a great team, but they're a solid team. They're a good team. They're definitely a playoff team. And they definitely need this win if they want to still make a shot at winning the NFC West and overthrowing the Rams. So for me, I'm ultimately going to go with the Seahawks here just because I'm worried about the concerns with Washington, a lot of question marks there, but I definitely anticipate this being a very close game because Washington is a gritty team. They have a solid defense, and I think it's going to be close. But I see you're also going with the Seahawks there, Roman.
Yeah, regardless of whether they have Smith or Haskins, this should be Seattle's game to lose. Even though they did blow out the Jets last week, Wilson still had a couple major mistakes, and they kind of got bailed out by 3 missed field goals by the Jets, but it is the Jets, so they are getting a better team, a better defense. So Wilson, if he's not on point, he can run into some trouble. But I think the offense of Washington won't be able to do much against the rising defense of Seattle.
Yeah, and we saw the Seahawks lose to the Giants just a couple weeks ago to Colt McCoy. And as I mentioned before, I think Washington has a better defense than New York, and I think Dwayne Haskins, if he starts, is a better backup than Colt McCoy. So I think it's gonna be a close game regardless. And it is. I think Washington could easily win this game. And if they win this game, it's looking really nice there for their division title championship, which is just incredible to say. If Washington wins, I might have to get a Washington football team 2020 division champs T-shirt because I don't know if anything defines 2020 more than a Washington football team division title. Just absolutely random and crazy and unexpected. The definition of 2020, if I do say so myself. But next up, we got a very easy matchup to pick. I think it's gonna be a close game. Jacksonville, as I mentioned, they're a tough team. They will compete. It won't be an absolute blowout. But the Ravens looked really good. Lamar Jackson had the cramps and then came out like Willis Reed in the 1970 NBA Finals, and everyone was losing their minds. And then he scored, and it was just an absolute just crazy show. But you already got the Ravens in there. Easy pick here for me. Also, it's going to be the Ravens. But we were all concerned maybe the Ravens aren't going to make the playoffs a few weeks ago. But I think now they have a really easy schedule here the last 3 games with that win against Cleveland last week. Most likely the game of the year so far. I think their roadmap to the playoffs is all but certain, even though they're currently out of it.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see Minshew back on the field for the first time in a while, but at the end of the day, it's Baltimore's a much better team and they're playing for a lot more.
Yeah, and I think Minshew is back though, like I said. So maybe it's a close game. Maybe Jacksonville pulls off a massive upset. Who knows? They beat Indianapolis, which feels like 3 years ago, but they did beat them to start the year. Next up, we got the Eagles and the Cardinals. I think this is going to be a close game. But maybe this also has a chance to be the game of the week with Eagles, with Jalen Hurts guiding them, providing the needed leadership that Wentz lacked. Maybe they have a shot here to overthrow the Cardinals, who are not a juggernaut by any means. Been very inconsistent so far this year, but they were able to return to the playoff spot after their last week win. Ultimately, I have some more trust in Kyler Murray and the Cardinals than I do with the Eagles. Very similar to the Browns in the last few weeks. I think with Jalen Hurts, it's very much like a prove it to me thing, where if I see it for 2 weeks, then maybe I'll have some more faith in him and the Eagles to win a game like this. But ultimately, I just feel more confident in the Cardinals. How do you feel, Roman?
I do like the Cardinals in this game. Although I do want to pick the Eagles. There's been rumblings that Chris will pick the Eagles, going alone on that pick. So therefore, I need to get a difference maker. I'm gonna go with the Cardinals and try and even up the score as tight as possible because there's not many weeks left and I need to cut the deficit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's gonna be a close game though, regardless.
Yeah.
Unless Jalen Hurts truly is a flash in the pan and he just looks absolutely brutal against the Cardinals, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, this is probably the game of the week if I had to pick one. Chiefs Saints. Saints are no longer the 1 seed because they lost last week, but they're this 2 seed in the NFC, already clinched the playoff spot. The Chiefs are the 1 seed, the defending champs. I would say the title favorite for this year, clearly. Probably the best team if you ask most people. So really big matchup here. Potential Super Bowl preview, who knows? So Roman, who do you like?
We could have saw Drew Brees come back this week, but it looks like they're gonna roll with Taysom Hill probably for another week before we get Drew Brees next week. I think this is actually a pretty easy game to pick. I'm gonna go with the Chiefs. If you had Brees and maybe a better, more in sync offense, I would have picked the Niners, or the Saints. My bad, but I think the Chiefs are just. I think they're much more on a roll, and Mahomes definitely had some mistakes against Miami. He cleans it up for this week for sure.
Yeah, I probably would have picked the Chiefs before the Saints put up a dud last week against the Eagles. So the Chiefs pick was even easier now. It's hopefully this isn't the Super Bowl preview because I feel like I would be much more intrigued by a Chiefs Packers Super Bowl instead of a Chiefs Saints. Because I think the Saints, I don't know, maybe Drew Brees comes back. It'll be cool if he maybe gets Super Bowl, goes off in the sunset. But anyway, we're talking about stuff that might not even happen. So let's move on here to something that will happen in the Browns and the Giants. The Browns coming off a loss last week, but it was an amazing game against the Ravens, a game they deserved to win had their defense not kind of crapped the bed there late and just let the Ravens walk up the field and score a few times. And the Giants lost last week, but are still in a very good spot to sneak into the playoffs. Again, something that none of us expected going into the year. For me, though, it's a pretty easy pick. I think the Browns are the move here. They just, like I said, they looked really good, showed a lot to me last week. And it would not surprise me if they win a playoff game or two come January. But who do you like, Roman?
Yeah, I don't think we would have picked Kareem Hunt and Baker Mayfield as our fantasy picks if we didn't think Cleveland was going to win. I thought this game would be a little bit more competitive, but I feel like the Giants maybe rushed Jones back, and he might have a setback for this game. I like the Cleveland Browns convincingly.
Convincingly, okay. I agree. I agree. Two scores is probably. I guess the only concern is if the Browns got so hyped up and ready for the game against the Ravens, is that they kind of have a letdown game here, maybe a trap game against the Giants. We saw, regardless of who's at quarterback, they can beat solid teams like they did a few weeks ago in the Seahawks. So maybe a letdown game, but I think more than likely that's the Browns taking control here against the Giants. And last game of the slate, Steelers Bengals. Talk about a get right game. The Steelers, after going 11-0. Have lost 2 games back-to-back to Washington and Buffalo. Cincinnati, though, not a good football team to say the least. And I think the Steelers are easily going to win this game. For my opinion, I'll just go ahead and put it in there right now. I think that this is an easy win for the Steelers. Definition of a get-right game. If I was Juju Smith, though, I would advise against dancing on the logo before the game because it's just not working, dude. Maybe you can do your dance thing, but maybe just do it in the end zone or just do it on the sideline. Don't do it on the logo because it seems like that's not working for him. But anyway, who do you like, Roman? The Steelers or the Bengals in this one?
I mean, you picked the Bengals to win last time in this matchup, so I thought you maybe had a chance.
Yeah, well, there was a different guy at quarterback, so to say the least.
That's true. I'm going to go with Pittsburgh, obviously. Pittsburgh's been very disappointing the past couple of weeks, but they're going to bounce back against a bad Bengals team without Joe Burrow, obviously.
Yeah, it's a much needed just get right thing because we're heading into the playoffs. Steelers are trending in the right direction or the wrong direction, excuse me, these last few weeks after starting off obviously as perfect as you possibly can. So if this is a close game though, or if it's the Steelers, God forbid, lose this game, it's panic time in Pittsburgh, baby, because that's not good. And they're honestly really fortunate that Baltimore won last week because if I think the Browns won, I think they'd only be a game back of the division. So that's they can sleep a little bit easier knowing that they still have a decent divisional lead. They're most likely going to win the division, barring anything crazy. But this is definitely a must win for them. Must get right game, much needed get right game for them. So, but that's it for the pick'em. As I said, we'll post Chris's picks in the comments down below, so check those out and comment on them if you disagree. As Roman teased there, he's most likely going to pick the Eagles, but who knows? Because he also is a big Cardinals fan, so we have to go down there and check it out. Before we conclude this episode, Roman, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, like you said, I can't really speak too much on the board itself since Chris doesn't have his picks in yet, but we differed on one. It's nothing major, but we'll see if we change anything else if Chris puts his picks in the document. And I'm looking forward to this race of a first place competition we have going on here because it's getting close.
Yeah, it's getting close in real life football, and most importantly, it's getting really close in our pick'em. I'm sure that's what most of the experts are most focused on is our pick'em here. But that's it for this episode. Again, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod. You also search us on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to smash that like button. You can also search us anywhere you listen to your podcast, as I just said. And be sure to leave a comment there down below. As I said, we're going to post Chris's picks for this week down there, so be sure to comment on those and check them out when you get a chance. And also just let us know your thoughts on if the Jets have a shot at beating the Rams, if the Jags have a shot at beating the Ravens, and also who you think is going to make the playoffs, as Roman and I really dove deep into the playoff picture here earlier in this episode. But that's all for this episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.